Wrong screen like a rookie.
We can see
I,
it. Marketing Unboxed.
Beautiful. Love to hear
yes.
it.
Thank you guys so much for joining. I'm not going to speak too much. This is Casey's. She's amazing at all of this. She has all the answers to things. So this is a very open forum. Ask questions, put them in chat, speak out loud, completely open roundtable. So I hope you guys enjoy it. But Casey, I'm passing over to you.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I have definitely met a number of you, but for those of you that I haven't met, I'm Casey McBride. I'm Soci's Senior Director of Digital CS and Value Strategy, which is basically just a long-winded way of saying that I help manage a lot of the value positioning and data storytelling that our customers need to, understand why they work with us and what the value is behind our agents and what that means to their overall marketing strategies. And from that, this presentation was kind of born out of a lot of trends that we've been seeing and a lot of challenges that our customers are having in the marketplace. In fact, challenges that I would imagine you guys are all experiencing as well. And with that, I would love to do a poll. And I really just want to ask you guys off the bat, like, are you noticing your website traffic, your business listing impressions, like those type of metrics declining? Um, I feel like I know the answer, but I'm very curious because I have seen it vary a little bit depending on industry, but not much.
I have it running, so I'll give it a couple more seconds so you guys can answer, and then we'll show the results. All righty. I'm going to
Let's
hit
see.
it, and then I'm going to share so you can see.
All right, yes, that's what I thought. Staying the same, I believe that. There are maybe like small, like I've seen service area businesses kind of hang out around like a net neutral. But most folks are experiencing a decline, and it almost doesn't matter what industry that you're in. In fact, we did get some results, and this is agnostic of industry. This is across the board, everybody. And we saw on Google an almost 10% decrease in map impressions, and a dip of about 5% in web visits. What I will say is the first 3 quarters of 2025, it was a way more significant dip. We were seeing like double digits. And then Q4, for some reason, bounced back a bit. We saw some decent numbers in Q4 year over year. And I think that's why at the end of the year, we kind of came out at that 9 and 5%. Um, Anyone have any questions on that or comments? Is any of this surprising? No? So I'm sure you guys have seen the CBI. If you haven't, this is from our CBI study. We're actually ramping up to do our 2026 CBI study soon, which I'm so excited for. My team is contributing heavily to the types of questions we're going to use, so I can't wait to see the results of that. But from our CBI study, we did find that obviously a pretty massive group of consumers, that 18 to 34 group, they are diversifying how they search for local businesses. We're seeing this fracture across Instagram, TikTok, 23 to 35%. At the time, it was 20% ChatGPT. I anticipate our 26 results are going to be much higher for LLMs. At the time of this last study, ChatGPT was like king. So I think that might have been the only primary one that we really asked about. But with the adoption of Gemini and Claude and people really getting it in their workflows, I'm anxiously awaiting to see how much higher that opt-in is going to be in those segments. And so that behavior kind of looks a little bit like this, right? You are maybe having a chat with Claude, which I do on an ungodly basis. And I might say, I'm craving a pumpkin spice latte. I don't want to go to Starbucks. I want to go to a really cute cafe, but I don't really know any nearby. It might suggest some. So then you're like, all right, I'm going to turn to social media. I want to get the vibes. Maybe I want to work from there for the morning. And so then you'll jump over there and you see a latte. And then you'll go to search from there and, get directions and see a star rating. So it's a very like multifaceted journey. And it might kind of throw you off a little bit because obviously search is still a part of that, but it's not the same anymore. So like these metrics, these impressions that we used to be so happy about getting, and we'd be like, wow, we're visible for so many wonderful things. They're really just a conglomerate of like a refined search. What was once a behavior of people searching multiple times to get to what they wanted, is really, you have four impressions and then a single click, where this is only one impression and one click to an action. If you even get users going in. I mean, what happens when it avoids search completely? What happens when they totally live on AI? And this quote I'm actually going to read word for word. But basically, traditional attribution models break down in these fragmented ecosystems. You can't track them anymore. You kind of lose how you get credit from one place to the next. Siloed measures of success, like what we've done in performance marketing for so long. Also, it's so funny. I said I was going to read this word for word, and now I'm like rambling on each of these points. But the siloed measurements, you miss so much and they don't work anymore. In fact, when you silo it, you're almost assuming that almost nothing is working because everything is a little bit off. It's at a deficit one place. You're not understanding where your audience is going anymore. And as consumers blend these behaviors, they're expecting more out of those individual channels. They're trying to create more of that like ecosystem. They're jumping from place to place. They're not just Google loyal, or if you're my mom, ask Jeeves, which I told her is insane considering the industry that I work in. But she insists that that is her search engine of choice. Um, and so it's like, what do we do with that? Like, it doesn't mean, and I'm also realizing I'm not checking the chat, so I'm going to keep the chat up here in case you guys have anything to say. Um, like how are we supposed to go to our bosses, or even we've had some situations where like franchise groups will complain and say like, what do you mean, like my I'm getting so much less traffic, I'm getting so much less impressions, like my website clicks are down. Like there's these people that we're held accountable to for results, and it's like, what do you do when these KPIs aren't reliable anymore? What do you measure? And so, what I want to kind of challenge a lot of us to do is start to think about organic marketing, not like performance marketing, but rather a bit more like brand marketing. I know that a lot of I saw a chat, I'll get to that in one second. I know that a lot of companies typically align organic marketing with like performance marketing teams. In fact, I used to work at Dick's Sporting Goods. I worked in SEO at Dick's Sporting Goods, and I was on our performance marketing team. I sat right next to our paid search team and our paid social team, and we all managed up to one director. And I think even then it was kind of a miss. And I think today it's definitely a miss because our measures for success are entirely different, and the ability to track that attribution is significantly different. So measuring success is just impossible when you're trying to classify it under the same umbrella. Um, so reading this now, maybe jumping ahead, but how are you seeing businesses respond? Are people using GEO, deploying using AI? Can you clarify what you mean? Like responding to a like the AI jump?
Just the changing behavior, yeah, from consumers. Because we know
Yeah.
people are doing it, and I'm kind of testing to see how LLMs respond to more natural language queries about the things that we care about. Like, are there good deals on apartments, or how do I negotiate, or that kind of stuff.
Yeah, God, we could have a whole unboxed on this session, and Leo, we probably should, but I'll give you my abbreviated answer. Um, it is truly about having a broader marketing mix now and a broader content strategy. So to kind of combat a lot of this, when it comes to, we'll talk LLM specifically, and then in the world of SEO, right? There are a number of technical SEO things that you can do, whether it is getting all of the structured data, that schema on the back end, making sure that it is representing and organizing your content correctly. We've seen a number of customers kind of create their local pages or their location pages almost like an outline to be understood. having really rich like FAQ content, saying things like, this page includes, and having like, book here, here's all of our services, and then breaking down each service. And then maybe there's a page that links out to the service and just being incredibly descriptive. I think we're going back to a time, and I remember this at, God, I don't even know how many years ago now at Dick's Sporting Goods. Like, we had specific SEO content writers. So it wasn't just an SEO analyst or a technical SEO analyst. You had true content writers that would expand and really make sure that they're refining. And now that we're talking, expanding and refining are differing terms. I guess what I'm saying is like, um, now that we're talking about kind of like semantic relevance and having those additional details, I think it's going to be really important to have everything covered in the text on your website. I mean, even if you interact with Claude or ChatGPT yourself, you can see what it's citing, and it's literally highlighting. Like if you click and follow through to a link of something that it's citing for you or telling you that it's getting its reference from, it'll highlight on the page where it got that information. And it's usually as simple as like a sentence or two on a page that's answering that specific query, that specific thing that you want to be known for, you want to appear for. So that's kind of the big thing is content. But then what I was also saying is around that marketing mix. I think it's really important to have a local social strategy. I think to have contextual social community building content at that local level is very important. It helps validate from a local user perspective that whatever information it needs to get. So if you are it sounds like your property management, if it's, understanding certain amenities at a location, if you're having events, if there are, examples of your residents and their pets, and, all of that contextual relevance is so good for this kind of diversified space. And then there's also the area that is a little harder to control, which is like Reddit or like PR resources, like people who are writing about you third party, like local news and things like that. Shockingly enough, gets referenced quite a bit as like an authority type signal or a trust type signal for you to appear in all of these spaces now. That was a very long-winded response, so hopefully that helped.
Casey, did you see the question that Sarah had asked in the chat?
Our prices are updated a couple days a week on our website. That counts as a recent update and recency to LLMs. Yes, absolutely yes. Um, where I was going with organic marketing, kind of like brand marketing, is thinking about the value of being seen because we're losing sight of that tracking to that click, right? Like people aren't clicking the same way. We talked for years, God, when I started in SEO, it was everybody was afraid of zero click, zero click, zero click. And if only they saw what was happening now in 2026, like we are truly in the zero click era. You're probably not going to get a lot of people to your website. I actually don't anticipate that website traffic is going to go up much at all unless you're counting the traffic for the crawler that's hitting your site to then surface your content in a different space. Because I think these behaviors are just going to continue to happen. And so if we can't track that click anymore, if we can't trust page traffic as our year over year KPI, our quarter over quarter KPI, the thing that we're holding our bonuses against, then what can we trust? And I argue that we have to kind of temper our thinking and change it almost into the same way that, oddly enough, we would think about a TV commercial or a billboard or a radio ad. It's like, what is the value of being seen, of being heard and mentioned? How notable is our brand in these channels now? Because they're not performance marketing channels anymore. And I'm not sure that they ever really were, but they definitely aren't now. I'm curious if anybody totally disagrees with me. I'm going to take that as a no, and I'll run with it. Um, And so, kind of a little bit like this, right? Like you still have a touch of a lot of those engagements. You still get a sense of your impressions and your calls and your directions and those signals that tell you that you're successful. But now it's about understanding like, what is my share of voice in LLMs? Um, how many people know about my brand? How much reach am I obtaining like in social media, and how relevant is that? How many people can recall my brand? Um, and then from there, it's understanding those conversion factors. Are people filling out applications? Are there bookings? Are there reservations? Are people purchasing online? And like, of course, conversions still absolutely matter, but it's gonna come down to more about correlations between our actions to our bottom line. And so what I'm kind of saying here is we're not trying to like stitch together a perfect attribution model because one truly does not exist. It's more about how can we maybe target certain actions, tie them to our outcomes, and try to make some assumptions on their impactfulness. So basically, like, am I noticing some of my bottom of the funnel things happening, like increases in call volume or increases in store visits or bookings or in-store sales even when I do certain actions, when I launch new local campaigns, when I boosted up the number of reviews I was responding to, when I changed my standard to responding within 24 hours. What impact did that have on those locations as a whole? If I'm posting more video content on TikTok, it's hard because it's like I'm not necessarily just tracking the funnel. Like, oh, this video on TikTok got 5 clicks, and from those 5 clicks, I got one booking. That isn't the only value of posting that video on TikTok anymore. And it never really was. So it's like, how do we correlate the value of some of these actions to what we're seeing in the bottom line at our locations? And a lot of that really comes down to, I'm going to jump a little far ahead, but a lot of that comes down to like testing properly, like making sure that we are kind of singling out some groups and trying to test and learn. Like, I think even though it's a really hard time to work in marketing for the sake of like measuring the success, it's also a really like fun and exciting time to work in marketing because there's a lot of testing and experimenting that we get to do to try and understand the impact and the effectiveness of what we're doing. And so just a couple things to think about, like breaking things up into group, running micro tests, running things like that to then understand certain correlating impacts. Consider seasonality. Make sure if you're trying to test certain areas that you're not impacted by weather or time of year. It's really good to look at things like year over year because, February doesn't behave the same way as March or April or May, and it never will because consumers behave differently during all of those months. So something to think about there. Um, are there like other external factors? Like there's just a lot to think about that could be impacting your bottom line. Lookalike audiences, and if you have a good analytics team, good for you. Definitely partner with them to try and get to some things that might be statistically relevant to kind of then help you deploy larger strategies. And some of those ideas here would be around like a time-based correlation. So maybe we doubled our local social posts in April. We saw a 20% increase in direction requests, which is totally separate and random, right? In March. But it's like it happened in that time frame. I'm seeing bottom of the funnel impact from actions that I took in an entirely different channel. And if I can rule out some other things, if I can test that in maybe a specific group compared to others, and it's a lookalike audience, maybe I can draw some conclusions about that behavior, about the impact of some of that social behavior. Also, geo-based correlation. So locations with active Google Business Profile updates saw 15% more than those without. So, being able to segment into some groups and understand what actions you're taking and how that does impact your overall performance. Even some channel overlap, like what if we have a good local social strategy and a really strong review strategy in some locations, and we notice that they're getting significantly more bookings or they're getting a lot more in-store sales than those that were not doing that strategy. Um, and then also there's the kind of like control factor. So it's like maybe you pause certain things in some areas and try to understand dip, and it can help you kind of single out like, oh wow, my average order volume in some of these locations is taking a dip, and it correlates with the time that maybe we stopped a certain social campaign, or maybe we didn't run those Google posts, or we didn't make any updates or answer reviews for a period of time. I think what's hard about this for all of us is like it's not perfect, and it kind of forces us to make some assumptions, but I think unfortunately, that's the reality of organic. It's hard enough sometimes to measure ads and boosts and paid search campaigns. And with those, you have pretty clear attribution models most of the time, and it still can get messy and hard to really get to the bottom of what you're earning there, let alone organic, where we are really just putting things out into the ether and trying to figure out where we're seeing the most impact and how we can piece that together. And really, that is going to come down to correlation and to thinking about it more as a brand effort than necessarily a true conversion mapping, attribution mapping practice. I think the other thing that's going to help significantly is post-sale attribution. So I think really bolstering our surveys after somebody makes a purchase or after they're working with you to try and understand how they discovered you, what caused them to want to make a purchase. Um, I think that's going to be crazy important. Things like select all when it comes to like how many platforms do you see us on can answer a lot of questions about where we're most impactful and how many people are interacting with us and finding us. And then even like things like what made you want to purchase? Like what did you find out about us? What did you like where's our messaging coming across the most? And I think a lot of that post sale is going to help us significantly understand and help correlate back to some of these efforts that we're making in search, social, and reputation. Um, I'll pause there for a second. I would love to hear any questions, agreements, oppositions, really anything under the sun that,
Especially anyone who'd answered to the poll and responded to like what they were seeing or not seeing, like that would be interesting to share, I think. So Casey can kind of talk through that a little bit more too.
yeah,
We have a silent group today.
I know.
I can jump in. I can just say that I was actually just on the phone about an hour and a half ago with my Bright Edge SEO rep, and we were talking about how just overall, in the past 6 to 8 months, the volatility in search because of AI overuse, and he's seen from, most of his customers this decline. So just confirming what you said.
Yeah. And I'm just curious from anybody here, like when it comes to then reporting up to, your CMOs or your CEOs and or the board or whoever, like it's like I'm curious like what you guys are doing today. Is it just like we're reporting, yeah, it's down, and then why is just because of this? And it's just, I mean, do we find that like executives are or leadership is like accepting that as an answer, or are they kind of pushing back?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We're kind of a small, unique B2B organization, and they're not pushing back, but you wanting to know that we're on top of why and
Yeah,
just monitoring it and really trying to connect the dots, like you said, with the our business and sales and some of this activity with search.
absolutely.
I can jump in for a sec. I'm property management, so it's a little different for us. We see that our website's getting less clicks, and while that could be alarming, I think we've shifted our focus on how do we make sure that we're getting that traffic driven in from other directions. So how do
Yeah.
we improve the way we're appearing, to the LLMs, how we're, being pushed, from other sources. Um, so there's a lot of people that we've been doing that, but it looks like Rob has basically the same deal in the chat. But yeah, that's what we're doing, and it seems like leadership's okay with that.
Good. That's
Yeah.
good. I know I always struggled, in the past where I would have to present like certain SEO numbers, right? And, to CEO, CMO and say like, oh, well, football is down 20% or golf is up 10%. And a lot of times, even our why, it was really hard to we got a lot of push. I was like, well, what do you mean? We should be up for football. And it was a really interesting conversation to have a lot of the time where I was just like, well, the demand isn't there. Like kids aren't playing football as much as they used to. And that's not always like it's always kind of hard to like sell that to leadership. So thank you guys for sharing. some of how that's going. Um, and then, kind of just some final thoughts here. Like your standard metrics aren't gone. There's always going to be people that visit your website. There's always going to be people that click and you're always going to get some kind of impression in these channels, right? It's just not the like I would not recommend if you're setting quarterly goals going in and saying like, well, I'm going to be up 20% next quarter or next year because odds are we're probably not. And so if we're in a down market, it's less about like, these specific KPIs and how do we measure them and more about like, how are we handling this fractured marketplace and how are we best representing ourselves? And is that translating to our performance, like in location, in store, in our residences? Like, are our leases up? Like, you know, it is way more about that full-fledged like storytelling and less about like, I did a great job. My traffic is up 20%, my leads are up 5, because it's gonna fail us. It's already failing us in a lot of ways. And that's all I got.
Anyone have any questions relevant to this, if not specifically what Casey was talking about? No. All right. Well, Casey, thank you so much for your, oh yeah, I will send the recording out. I did record this. I'll send the recording out, Karen. Um, Thank you guys so much for joining. Was there another one I missed in the channel? No, I think we're good. Thanks so
Great.
much, Casey.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
everyone.
Yeah, these are meant to be short and sweet, so I appreciate your time. Bye,
Love
guys.
it. Bye,
Thanks.
guys.